Hello and welcome to a special education-themed episode of The Point. I'm your guest host, Jimmy Dore, and we've got some terrific points this week. The first video is from the former chancellor of the Washington, D.C. Public Schools, Michelle Ray. She's going to give us a point about firing teachers in down economic times. And then there's the next point is from the Daily Howler blogger, Bob Summerby. And he's talking about the surprising success of minority kids are making in America and why you never hear about it. And our final point is going to be talking about the controversy surrounding the newly released documentary Bully. And, you know, we live in a funny country, right? Because we're the richest country in the world, but we're also broke. I don't know how that happened. So I tried to figure out where all our money went, and I turned on the news, and the news guy told me the teachers took it. Makes sense, right? I mean, why else would you become a teacher unless you're greedy, right? And those teachers are so sneaky, they have all our money, yet they still drive junky cars just to throw us off. Oh, there goes another teacher taking another sack of money out to their tercel. I hate those teachers. But you know what? Now we're firing teachers by the thousands all across the country. We're raising class sizes, and I say finally. It's about time we got rid of some of those blood-sucking teachers and took some of that teacher money and maybe funneled it towards Wall Street where we could do a little good, you know? Give it to the job creators. That's what I'm talking about. That's how bad our economy is, folks. We are now laying off teachers by the thousands because that's what's going to get us out of this depression. Dumber kids. Yeah, that's our problem. We're too smart now. I mean, how are we going to convince China to open a factory here if we're all smart enough to know we're being exploited like slaves? Okay, now let's meet our panel. On that note, our first guest is an English teacher who taught in the LA Unified School District for 15 years and a former Democratic peace candidate for Congress. It's Marcy Winograd. Hi, Marcy. How are you?
Hi, Jimmy. Great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, thanks for making it down. I appreciate it. And next to you, he's an education reporter for the NPR station KPCC right here. I'm a fan of his. It's Adolfo Guzman-Lopez. Did I say that correctly?
You're pretty close.
I have some marbles in my mouth. I have some marbles. And watch this.
You're not the first and you won't be the last.
Okay. And we also have the chief academic officer for Camino Nuevo charter schools here in Los Angeles, Atyani Howard. Did I say that correctly?
Atyani Howard.
I was right there. I was right there, you guys. All right, so let's go to our first point, and then we'll come back and talk about it. It's our first point is from Michelle Ray.
Hi, this is Michelle. As you know, we're facing one of the worst financial crises this country has ever seen. So undoubtedly, what we're going to be looking at is budget cuts across the country, but in particular, budget cuts in education. As if this isn't bad enough, we're about to face a worse situation because of the way that we conduct layoffs in this country. Currently, most jurisdictions use an antiquated system called last in, first out, which basically means that the last teacher hired has to be the first teacher fired, regardless of how good they are. This is really problematic for kids for three main reasons. First, the research shows that when you do seniority-based layoffs, we actually end up cutting some of our most effective teachers. The second reason that it's not good for kids is because we actually end up having to lay off more teachers and lose more jobs because the junior teachers are paid the least and we need to fire more of them in order to make up the budget deficit. And third, this negatively, disproportionately impacts the lowest performing schools that have the largest number of new teachers in them. So we can actually do something about this. Right now, we're working in states across the country to really push legislators and governors to change the rules that govern how we do layoffs. We're excited about having you join us in this fight, so please go on to www.studentsfirst.org and sign the pledge to save great teachers.
Okay, Michelle Rhee with a great point about last in, first to be fired, the policy they have for firing teachers. And the only point that I'll make about her point is that I think she misses the point, is that why are we firing teachers in the first place, right? That doesn't seem like when you're a good planning for our future. And I think that her outrage would be better kind of focused if she was upset about the fact that we live in a country where we think it's proper to plan for the future by laying off teachers, and her solution is just to lay off different ones. So it seems, like a Band-Aid on a dead body. as far as I'm concerned. Marcy, what do you have to say about it?
I couldn't agree with you more, Jimmy. We shouldn't be asking how should we decide how many thousands of teachers to lay off and which ones will lose their jobs and which students will be without teachers. The real question is our priorities in this country. Why are we spending trillions of dollars on war? Why is it the General Electric does not pay taxes? A multi-billion-dollar corporation. This is the question. These are the questions we need to ask. In terms of her proposal, do we want to get into the specifics of that?
Sure.
Sure, okay. I'm a teacher. I have been since 1993. I worked for 15 years for the Los Angeles Unified School District. And when I ran for Congress, I took a little too much time off and I lost my seniority and I was laid off. So I know from what I speak. I'm also active in United Teachers of Los Angeles. When Michelle Reed talks about changing this seniority-based system, it sounds good, it sounds persuasive, and she makes some points that do resonate with people. I agree that we have to protect schools, the high-risk schools, the schools that are struggling the most, that have a more transient workforce. And we need to build in these protections, as we have in Los Angeles, so that we don't see massive layoffs disproportionately at those schools. On the other hand, I do want to say that this seniority-based layoff system protects not only experienced teachers, but also districts, because without it, they're going to be subject to all sorts of litigation. Taxpayers will be paying money to defend practices that may be discriminatory. And I'll tell you this, I guarantee you, we lose a seniority-based system, and there will be a purge of older teachers because they do cost more.
So I'll just answer you one question. Why are we spending $1 trillion on wars? Because if we don't fight them over there, we have to fight them over here, Marcy. Where's your head? Okay, let's go over to, now you're an education reporter. Now let's get your opinion on the last in, first out.
Well, my opinion is what I report on. And in California, as we speak, in April 2012, this is a huge issue in California. This California Teachers Association has tallied the number of preliminary pink slips that have gone out statewide to teachers. And this is because of a state budget crisis. So schools cost the state sends money to schools, so it's passing on this budget crisis. So there are 20,000 preliminary pink slips that have gone out to teachers. Now, if the past is any indicator, not all of those teachers will be laid off. School districts will find the money. There's a lot at play right now to get money from ballot measures to keep a lot of those teachers. But it's a big deal because school districts' main expense is its employees. They have to pay, and the most employees are teachers. So if they have to cut, and they've been having to cut money from their budgets, they're going to lay off teachers. And that's been happening a lot, and it's disrupted lives, it's disrupted education. The Legislative Analyst Office, the independent office in the state of California that is not partisan to the Democrats or Republicans, has agreed partly with Michelle Reed. The LAO has said that the way the districts have carried out their layoffs has been too costly, too expensive, and has not led to better education.
Now, so would you agree with that?
Well, that's what they say. I'm a reporter, so
you can't. What has been your experience reporting? I mean, what can you draw any conclusions?
There's low morale because of the layoffs at schools. They impact lives. A couple of years ago, the American Civil Liberties Union sued in Superior Court that students' constitutional rights were being violated because the students weren't being provided a good education, basically. And they were saying that these budget cuts are affecting schools with high minority populations because those schools have a lot of beginning teachers. And those are the teachers who are being, that are being laid off. So these schools with high Mexican-American, Latino population, Black population are losing a ton of teachers. And so there's you lose that continuity. As a student, you have a good teacher, you lose that continuity in the school.
So, and now you are from a charter school, so you don't really have to deal with this stuff, right? Am I correct about that? Or because first of all, is there a union at your charter schools?
Yes, Camino Nuevo does
have unions. Look at that.
A union. It is its own union.
Okay.
So
it's not.
It's not part of CTA. It did begin there, and then the teachers formed their own association called Camino Nuevo Teachers Association.
Oh, right. Okay.
So we don't have last in, first out policies.
Okay.
And I agree with everything that's been said. I think the issue, though, is that while all of that is sort of reflective of big systematic challenge, in the meantime, the kids are there in their seats and they need good teachers. And this policy does not support looking at quality and what quality students are receiving in the meantime. And this is too often the problem in education, is we're up on this level, on high level, sort of making decisions and looking at the system. And meanwhile, the kids are sitting there every day. And what quality are we offering them? And where is that factored into this discussion? And so I think it's a very, very complex issue that needs sort of an immediate and a long-term analysis and response.
Well, the problem, so you want to say something?
Well, I just wanted to interject. I think that there's a tendency to confuse the issue. If a teacher is not performing, that's a whole separate issue, and there is recourse for that in the public school system. There's support that can be offered, there's documentation. I see that as a separate issue from massive layoffs and determining that the seniority-based system needs to be thrown out the window. Once you do that, what are you looking at? You're looking at the potential for retaliatory firings, layoffs, older teachers being purged. You're looking at a culture of distrust in the schools because teachers won't know who's next to go. That's the opposite. That's counter to what we want. We want collaboration.
Yes.
We want trust.
Yes.
We want sharing of the wealth, of the intellectual wealth in our schools. So it's problematic. And at the end of the road, what you're talking about really, let's be honest, is union busting.
Well, what it seems to me is that, again, the focus goes on the teacher as being the problem. And, the teachers should be, I think it's really more useful to look at teachers as a solution to the problems that we're having instead of the problem. And it seems like people like Michelle Rhee and people who think like her always seem to point the finger at the teacher, and they never point the finger anywhere else. And if we can just get rid of these bad teachers, we just got these horrible teachers that keep mucking up our school system. They're greedy and they're lazy and they're every bad thing in the world that these teachers are. If you look to the teachers, what you're talking about, if the teachers don't accept whatever kind of system you're trying to impose on them, it's not going to work. We saw that happen in San Diego and in the early 2000s. And, if teachers don't embrace whatever system you're trying to, if they're not brought into it and made to feel part of it, it's not going to work.
One of the problems that you have is, what you're saying is it's a problem of perception. Teachers' unions are perceived as bad by some people. Mm-hmm. School districts and the administration, okay, we think that that's bad. But when you ask a parent, what about your school, the school that your kid goes to, and your own teacher? Oh, they're great, right?
Right.
So that's one of the big disconnects that I see in the reporting that I've done. Teachers parents like their neighborhood school, but they don't like these big systems, the administration, the teachers' unions.
It's just like everybody likes their own congressman, but they don't like Congress. Mm-hmm. And so what do you think what would be, because I always make the point that when people point the finger at the union, I say, the best schools in America have teacher unions, and the worst schools in America have teacher unions. So I don't really think the problem can be unions. I'll throw it out to everybody. Do you think that the unions are a problem, or if they, what problems do you see with the unions?
I mean, I would say, charter schools get a very bad rap for being non-union, and Camino Nuevo happens to have a union, and it has been a very, very productive partnership for us. So I would agree that I don't think the problem is the unions. I do think that Michelle Rhee talked about it being an antiquated policy. And I think that when unions first came into being, it was very innovative and an opportunity to reimagine what it could be like for workers to have rights and to be able to earn a living wage. And I think that same spirit of reimagining needs to be applied today to our current policies. So not that we're doing away with unions, but that we're bringing policies and practices in line with the magnitude of the problem.
You hear a lot people say, like charter schools, people think, charter schools are the answer to everything. Charter schools are very useful, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you would know more about this, but weren't the initial idea of charter schools was to have a certain amount of schools to be able to experiment with different ideas, and then we would see what works, and then we would replicate that. Mm-hmm. Well, now we've totally turned that on its head, and now the goal is to have charter schools. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, at least in California, that's what the law sought to do, is that you'd have a charter school and then a traditional school nearby feed off of the innovation of that charter school that's close by, and that hasn't really been played out. And the studies of charter schools, at least in California, have shown that a lot of them are performing at or about the level of the traditional schools.
That's what the data shows?
That's what the data shows. The schools of education have studied this. There are a lot of high-performing charter schools, and they've been very high-profile recently with some of these films, these documentaries about education. Waiting for Superman's a great example. If you just see that, you think that charter schools are the savior, right? But it's more complicated than that.
In terms of the union, I think teachers need some basic protection, and we shouldn't vilify the union. I agree. The union needs to be in the vanguard of professional development and change and new ideas. I agree with all of that. There's always room for that, certainly. In terms of charter schools, and I have worked at a charter school, an excellent charter school, I agree that the initial motive was to create a laboratory for other teachers, and we lost that somewhere along the way. Instead, what we have are endless school giveaways to corporate charters. Maybe there are philanthropic billionaires who then assume control of the charter school, which frankly does not take its fair share of special needs students. Instead, what we are doing is saddling the public school system with special needs students. In other words, we are subsidizing a semi-private institution.
So I have to interject there. That is a huge myth about charter schools, and I'll speak for our network of charter schools. We have higher rates of English language learners, we have higher rates of free and reduced lunch students, and we have the same percentage of students with special needs. So I think that's emblematic of the problem. There's all this mythology on both sides about what the union is and isn't, and what charters are and aren't. And that's part of why we're unable to do what the initial aim was and really collaborate to serve students.
And there are a lot of charter schools that have been closed down, too, because of conflict of interest, because of fraud.
Cheating scandals. I just want to go back to this idea that it's not true that charter schools are not taking their fair share of special needs students. You know, Los Angeles Unified School District had an independent monitor who studied this, who investigated this, and the results showed that absolutely we have public schools that are taking the most needy students. And I'm not talking about second language students, I'm talking about severe disabilities. And what this means is that our tax money is going disproportionately to support private, semi-private charter schools that are not, perhaps not in your case, but in general, not taking their fair share.
Okay, I've heard that point, and yeah, so maybe that is not the case but that is the data. And you know, when you hear people say we have to try everything, we have to try everything to fix education. I hear Tom Brokaw say that almost weekly. We have to try everything. Well, he doesn't mean everything. When people say that, they don't mean everything. Because I always say, oh, you mean put an extra teacher in every classroom and lower the class sizes down to 20, like they did in Finland? Oh, no, not like that. We don't mean that. We mean firing teachers. Oh, okay, that's what you mean. When they say everything, that's what they mean. They mean getting rid of the union. So if you look at the top countries that have the best results in education, Finland would be at the top, and that's exactly what they did, right? They put 3 teachers in each classroom. They have the same kids for 3 years. They raised the pay for teachers. Teachers are now as respected as lawyers and doctors, and no one is talking about doing that in America. And I'm sorry, but that's the end of this segment. But we'll be right back. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the advances minority students have been making in America that the media has kept secret. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to the special education-themed episode of The Point. I'm guest host Jimmy Dore, and our next point comes from the Daily Howler blogger, Bob Summerby.
I'm Bob Summerby from the Daily Howler, and my point concerns the good news in American public schools over the past 20 years. The National Assessment of Educational Progress is the gold standard of American testing, a federally sponsored testing program by which everyone swears. Test scores are way up on the NAEP. Black kids are way up, Hispanic kids are way up, white kids are up. How big are the score gains? As of 2009, black fourth graders were scoring higher in math than their white counterparts from 1992, the year Bill Clinton ran for president. That's astonishing progress, and no one ever hears about these test scores. And now that we have this kind of success, all we hear is that our schools are failing, our teachers can't teach, nothing works, we need to privatize. Every area of our public discourse is controlled now by corporate and conservative talking points. This is one of the most ridiculous areas. People deserve to know this very good news about what's gone on in the public schools. For more information on the NAEP, N-A-E-P, go to the Daily Howler, enter the search engines, and you'll get to some detailed reporting on what these test scores are like. People deserve to hear the good news about Americans' children and teachers.
Okay, wow, that was some interesting information. Let's go to our education reporter first on this one. Is what he says true? Are minority students really making great strides? Have you uncovered any of this in your reporting?
Well, I can tell you that in the state of California, yeah, the test scores are going up for minority students, but there's this pervasive gap between the performance of Black and Latino students and their white and Asian counterparts. And that gap even shows up in schools in affluent neighborhoods where there are Black and Latino students that are more affluent. So it's a big problem for school districts. The state hasn't really figured out a way how to improve that. And it goes to a lot of issues. It goes to the issues of how do we educate a growing population in the state of California. Half of the students in the state of California are Latino.
Right, okay. And so that's another big problem that people, when they measure American students and our education system against other countries, we have unique situations in America that people don't have in other countries, right? Like we have a lot of foreign language where English isn't their first language, so that doesn't happen in Finland. Everybody speaks the, so we have a lot of unique challenges here. How do you think the media would react if to this news? Like if they were told this news and you think they would just be skeptical of it? I mean, are you skeptical of this news?
I think they should be skeptical of it. I think we have a huge achievement problem. Our minority and lower income students are greatly at risk. We don't have any magic bullets to fix the problem. We don't have freedom within district schools to say, okay, I'm going to try a place-based approach. Or if you even think about bilingual education and Proposition 227 in the state of California and what that did to ruin basically opportunities for students whose first language is not English, there isn't good news about kind of our approach to addressing this problem.
So you would you're disputing our friend from the Daily Howler. Okay, I wish he was here. Marcy, let's throw it over to you. Do you think the media just isn't reporting these numbers, or is he making these numbers up?
Well, I think we need more information. I think that the NAEP, which is a random test given to a relatively small sample of students, and then the meaning of that, the results are extrapolated. This is a test a lot of people don't pay attention to, certainly in the media. It's not a high-stakes test. It's not going to result in anyone getting fired, right? Students don't really even know about it, so people just generally don't talk about it.
So he would say that makes it a more reliable test.
Yes, and it may do that. It may do that, but I think we need some more information. For example, we need to know graduation rates. We need to know college graduation rates of students. We need to know dropout rates. We need to know referral rates to the discipline office. How many African American and Latino students are still being expelled for behavior problems in class? These are key questions when you're looking at closing the achievement gap. In terms of closing that gap, which I agree is absolutely imperative, certainly in Los Angeles, we have a district with about 700,000 students, and I believe 70% are Latino, many of them English language learners. We need to rethink education. It needs to be culturally relevant. What are we reading about our own history, our own ethnicity, our own culture that speaks to us, that is meaningful? We also need to address the #1 predictor of student success in school, and that is socioeconomic status, wealth inequality, poverty. Our schools need nurses. We're losing our nurses as well as our teachers. Our students need 3 meals a day. They need eyeglasses so they can see the board. These issues are paramount.
Well, this brings up a point that people fail to make, I think, when we talk about schools and failing schools, is that again, we have great public schools doing great work, and then we have failing public schools. And the failing public schools, ironically enough, or coincidentally enough, are always in failing communities. You never go, Beverly Hills High is doing pretty good. You know, they're not the ones having trouble. So why don't people ever focus on, I mean, in your reporting, why is it that people never make that connection between a failing community and a failing school? And people think that we're just, somehow a school is going to be able to fix all the problems of these kids, you know, these kids whose parents, you know, because Barack Obama says teachers' pay should be tied to their performance, even though nobody else in this damn economy seems to be tied to their performance.
Well, you have to get at the definition of failing. If anything, No Child Left Behind, you know, this federal education law, what its legacy is, its labeling of schools as failing when a certain subgroup has not been able to reach a certain test performance. So a lot of schools that are succeeding, but one particular demographic in the school isn't reaching a certain benchmark, they're labeled as failing. So that's how that word has entered into the lexicon nationally. And perhaps, and a lot of teachers say that it's unfairly been thrown out at schools that are not failing. I can tell you on this issue of how to better serve minority students or to reform certain policies, one of the good stories that I've reported on recently is this effort to change the truancy and expulsion policies at LA Unified. So they've been very, very harsh recently. So there have been a group of activists that in recent years have worked with the court system, have worked with administrators to, instead of give tickets, which end up costing students and their families hundreds of dollars, to have administrators and police maybe ask questions first as to why a student is late or not showing up to class and school before giving them a ticket. And that's changing the dynamic.
And so you don't think, so Marcy, you're saying standardized tests are not the answer? That's what I'm going to,
well, you
don't think that we should just do more standardized reading, writing, and arithmetic, Marcy? That's what schools are for. I don't know what you want to talk about, cultural, and what is that all about?
I think we need a balance, but I don't think that teaching to a test, and that's, frankly, that's what happens. You know, if a student does not pass the California high school exit exam, they are then segregated into a class, and for a whole semester, they're doing drill and kill work. And that does not encourage students to come to school, and that is not engaging. So we need to move away from this. Yes, we need accountability. We need multiple measures of accountability, portfolios,
and why do you
testing, observation, listening to the student voice about their own education. But the test culture is certainly not one that is engaging anyone.
It seems to, it's slowly coming around that people are coming to your point of view on that. And let me just ask you, what do you think the solution is? I mean, how do we reach minority students? What would your ideas be for that?
I think schools have to be organized in a holistic way. They have to take a place-based approach, meaning you have to look at the community that you're serving and figure out what it is that you need to put into place at your school to respond to their needs, knowing that they're going to bring all of the issues that the community is grappling with into the school. How do you, so I fully agree with Marcy, how do you structure your school so that you have wraparound services, you have enrichment activities, you have a strong, solid academic program, you have early literacy for students who don't come to school with that preparation, you have language programs for students whose first language is not English, you have, you know, all kinds of services that align with the issues that that community faces. And it's not the school coming in and telling the community how they need to learn.
So what I'm hearing, I think that we're all in agreement that it's a complicated issue and that a standardized test doesn't fix anything.
I pulled some of the numbers on the difference between the demographics, the student demographics in California and the teacher demographics in California. So nearly 2/3 of the students in California are minority, if we want to label them, Black and Latino, but nearly 2/3 of the teachers are white in California. So the scholars are saying, well, there's a big difference there between what the teachers understand, the students' background, and how they're able to address some of the problems that the challenges of education that they bring to schools.
And why do you think, before we're up, we only have a few minutes left in this segment, why do you think that when people, I brought this up in the last segment, I'm going to bring it up again, when people say we need to try everything to fix our schools, why do you think they don't really mean everything? Because they never mention those things I mentioned before about putting an extra teacher in each classroom. Like, that's a real investment in our education, and it really has paid off for other countries that have done that. Why do you think that hasn't happened in America?
I think when you have a system where schools are funded based on your zip code, that speaks volumes as to what we value and who deserves what. And so I think that
Great
really
point.
is emblematic of what the issue is.
I mean, that's exactly what, you're another way to put what you were saying before is that socioeconomically determines your success. Zip code is what she's saying. It's the same kind of thing. Socioeconomic status, zip code determines the success. And do you see any, let me ask you, Adolfo, do you see any hope in changing the conversation away from being punitive with teachers to supporting them and maybe actually investing more in our schools? Do you think that can be turning this around?
Well, it's happening on a piecemeal level. I remember doing a story probably about 8 or 9 years ago of a charter school in LA County that was trying merit pay. So that's a big issue, right?
Yeah.
Give extra pay for teachers that are doing well. Well, how do you measure that they're doing well, right? So is it test scores or not? But the way this charter school in the San Fernando Valley did it is that they asked the teachers, and the teachers came up with the system. So it wasn't just one person deciding the merit pay. There was observation by a peer. There was observation by a couple of different administrators, maybe even give the students a say, maybe even give the parents a say. So, but that's complicated. That's a complicated formula even for a campus, but try that on a district level where you've got a school board that's elected. Every single board member, at least in the state of California, I think of the nation, is an elected official.
Okay, and we have to break, but I want to make this point in this segment. So before we get to our next points, I'm going to just make an executive decision here, and I want to talk about, because this always gets brought up when we talk about education, and I don't think people understand what it's about. Tenure, right? That's the thing that almost everybody is against, tenure. Marcy, could you talk about what is the purpose of tenure?
Well, the purpose of tenure is to provide some sort of professional security so that people want to become teachers. They want to invest their life in this profession. It's not a revolving door, and ultimately that should benefit the students.
I think a good example of how tenure actually comes into effect is that, let's say you have Michelle Rhee takes over your school system, and she has all these crazy ideas, and she wants to implement them, and let's say you disagree with them. Well, you're a master teacher, which she is not. And so you know it won't work, so now you have tenure, so you can stand up and you're not afraid to say that this isn't working. And that's the beauty of tenure, because it gives people who have proven themselves already, and that it gives them the kind of footing that they need to stand up and say what's needed in education without fear of losing their job. That's the point of tenure, and we already see that they want to get rid, those are the teachers they want to get rid of first. The ones who know the most, the ones who aren't afraid to speak up and tell them that they're doing it wrong, they want to get rid of them. So let's talk, because you're a charter school. So what are your views and feelings on tenure?
I agree with your points that it is initially to invest teachers in a lifelong career and to provide safety for them to speak their minds, express their political views, etc. I don't know that that's how it's played out in reality, and I think that, like any big systematic policy, there are positives and negatives to it, and certainly at our organization, we do not have tenure. You can earn a 2-year contract after you've had consecutive years of high ratings on your teacher evaluation. But I think that if schools are really organized in such a way that they know that teachers are the lever to change and they have the greatest amount of impact on the students, and there's genuine collaboration, I don't know how, saying that only tenure is the way to create real community and lifelong investment and a sense of safety for professionals. I don't know that that's...
Right. I agree. I don't think it's the only way. I think it's a good way. I think it's a way that has worked. Do you have something to say?
Well, yeah, this discussion about tenure has raised the issue of how you evaluate teachers, right?
Yes.
And so many teachers that I talk to at public schools, public school districts say, well, it's not enough that an administrator comes into my classroom once a year.
Right.
And that's usually all the evaluation that happens at a school, is that once a year an administrator comes in and observes the teacher.
Whenever someone gets tenure, remember that that person was tenured by an administrator. That there wasn't another teacher who gave that teacher tenure. So if that's a bad teacher, they got it because of an administrator. We have to get to our last points. I'm glad thanks you for great opinions. I appreciate it. We'll come back. This is the point, and we're going to come back. We're going to talk about bullying in American schools. Hi, welcome back to the special education edition of The Point. I'm your guest host, Jimmy Dore, sitting on my coat and punching my one thought. For our final point, let's take a look at the trailer from the documentary Bully.
The last couple of days, we had heard that Tyler had his head shoved into a wall locker. They said he's a geek.
My concern is that you were making someone feel so uncomfortable that they didn't want to be in school.
I feel kind of nervous going to school because I like learning, but I have trouble with making friends.
They said he's a geek. Some kids had told him that he was worthless, to go hang himself. And I think he got to the point to where enough was enough.
Tonight, a tragic situation.
A Perkins boy, just 11 years old, believed to have been desperate enough to take his own life.
This is an awfully complicated and difficult issue.
Kids will be kids, boys will be boys. They're just cruel at this age.
Here what we get is nothing's wrong, we didn't do anything, everything's fine.
They punch me, strangle me, take things from me, sit on me.
Give it to him hard!
He's not safe on that bus.
I've been on that bus. They are just as good as gold.
My voice is not going to fall silent. I will go to my grave until a difference is made.
We reached out to parents that have lost kids, parents of kids that are being bullied all over the world, and it took off like wildfire.
All it takes is for one person to stand up.
Be the difference. Go out and find that one child, that new kid standing over there by himself. Be willing to stand up for him.
Everything starts with one and builds up. Eventually we have an army.
If we all do it together, we will change the world.
Okay, so that was a trailer from the movie Bully. And, you know, my opinion on this is, you know, as a country, we invade other countries illegally and kill their people, steal their stuff. We allow Wall Street to bully homeowners and steal their wealth and put it in their pockets and our pensions. We now, the Supreme Court just said that the government can strip search you for any infraction whatsoever. We have war criminals at the top of government ordering torture. Nobody is held accountable. And we're surprised that kids are beating the shit out of each other. Isn't that something? Now, isn't focusing on this kind of bullying at the very bottom of the chain just another way for us to ignore the real problem of our society and feel good about it at the same time?
You've had school districts lay off counselors, nurses, you know, all these people who would normally catch these kinds of problems in a school. So that's what I've seen in some of the reporting that I've done, is that, you know, the schools are really pushed to the limit on the problems that they're able to address, not only the academic problems, but the problems that the kids bring from outside, from the street, from their home.
As a society, do you think that we're bullies? I think we're bullies. I think we embrace bullying, and I don't think anybody calls it out. Only recently did they call out Rush Limbaugh for bullying someone. Do you think that?
I do agree with you. I think bullying has become the norm. We see it at the highest levels of government, as you said, with our invasions, our occupations. And then we see, and then we expect something different at our schools, and that's not reasonable. In the schools itself, though, I do think we absolutely need to address this issue of bullying. I mean, just recently, here we have a story in the LA Times about several people being killed up in Oakland by a kid who felt bullied. He wanted revenge. He was made fun of for the way he spoke. There are things that schools can do. Schools can adopt school-wide measures. They can have assemblies to talk about bullying, to make it explicit that it's not acceptable. They can assess their schools. To what degree is bullying a real problem? English teachers can be encouraged to have students write in their journals, as my students did, about this topic. You can learn a lot. You can implement peer mediation. build
peer
trust.
mediation.
Peer mediation
Peer
programs,
mediation.
yes.
I think that's the answer to bullying is peer mediation. But, you know, we live in a world where we tell our kids that don't bully each other, and then they go home and turn on the news and they see cops pepper spray. Oh, is that a pregnant lady? Pff, little pepper spray. Oh, is that a 73-year-old? Oh, we'll just pepper. Oh, some college kids, pff, pepper spray. So we're all about bullying in this country. So I really don't. Do you think bullying is worse now today than when we were kids, or when I was a kid, or when you were a kid?
I do think it's worse. I think that kids are bombarded with violence in their homes, on their communities, on the television, the internet. I think social media has really taken bullying to a new level. The student in New York that was completely outed, you know, that whole issue.
Oh, with the video?
Yes, with video. I mean, that's a whole nother level of bullying. That's not about one-on-one, but really ruining someone's life through social media. So I do think it's much worse. I think we live in incredibly violent times, and our kids are reflecting that how we're living.
It seems like we're becoming a more brutal society in general, and I think our kids are just reflecting that.
But I also think that our schools, to Marcy's point, are not organized in such a way that there's much emphasis on taking care of students, right? What do you hear about in the media? You hear about test scores, test scores, test scores. You don't hear much about how are we taking care of kids? Why do we have metal detectors in our school? Where are the peer mediation programs? Where are the mental health counselors for kids who really are not well adjusted and are expected to navigate the academic world? You don't hear any conversation about that.
Well, I'll tell you, Atyani, I'm sorry. Oh, God, darn it. Atyani. Oh, I said it right that time. No, I would not expect you to have that answer. That's really refreshing to hear you say that about how a school system can actually meet the needs of kids instead of just teaching them reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Why would you not expect me to have that answer?
Because I have a negative view of charter schools. I'm a critic, but it's very encouraging to hear that you embrace unions and that you understand that there's bigger problems than just teaching 3 R's. And I mean, that you seem like an enlightened am I being condescending? Is that what I'm doing right now? I'm being a little condescending.
I would encourage you to come visit Camino Nuevo Charter Academy.
Yeah, it sounds. I'm going to tell you.
Have a very
I'm glad I met
approach.
you.
Yeah, on
because
all levels.
I'm learning about. I have my wife's a teacher. I have a niece who taught at a charter school. And so I've only heard one side of the story. So, I haven't heard this side. So this is good. I'm glad I could.
I will say, though, I don't think that Camino is emblematic of the entire charter movement. So I will.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it.
I would say that schools in general tend to be in denial. At least that's my experience. I mean, what principal wants to talk about a kid being thrown in a dumpster, which happened when I was teaching, not when I was actually in the classroom, but heard about it later and talked to the perpetrator. Nobody wants to admit that about their school. They don't want that out there. So what we have is a culture of denial, much as we have nationally about the crimes that we commit around the world. And if you're in denial, you're never going to address the problem.
Right, and I think you saw that in the clip with that administrator saying, "Oh, your child is as good as gold on that bus," and then there's footage of brutality happening.
What is your advice to parents who suspect their kids are being bullied?
I mean, I would say you should be relentless and go and offer to partner with the school in whatever way is productive. And certainly, if you don't feel like the school is being responsive, you should remove your child from the school.
You have to intervene.
Yeah.
I don't think you can expect your child to navigate this kind of behavior. You know, the bullying. It's too brutal. And clearly they are feeling vulnerable from the beginning. That's why they are being bullied.
It's almost, I remember from back when I was in school, and it's almost worse for kids who's being bullied to parents to come and try to intercede, because it just makes you want to bully that kid more, those kids, right?
It is a delicate minefield, as you say, because you don't want to undermine the credibility of the student to fight, not literally fight, but to assert his or her rights.
I think the way that we can fix this is, so people want to end this bullying, right? So how do we do it? I think the best way to do it is the way we made smoking unpopular. You know, that You do it through advertisements. You do it through a public relations campaign to make bullying uncool. I think we can do it.
One of the schools I visited recently was Edison Middle School in the Florence Firestone part of LA County. Real tough gangs there, real rough and tumble neighborhood. And the school's principal was implementing a program to cut down on truancy. And the way he was doing that is by having assemblies where he talked to the students about the merits of responsibility, of respect. He rewarded students who showed good civic virtues. So that school really developed a mission, a civic mission. And that was the principal's effort and job and all that. So when a school does have as its mission to instill civics, I think that's when a school, what I've seen, that's when a school does a good job in cutting down on some of these behaviors.
And to return to my earlier point about peer mediation, we can make peer mediators we can make that a coveted job. We can make that cool. They can wear special vests, as they do at some schools. And
really?
When I worked at a middle school, we had a saying that we would say over the loudspeaker every morning, and that was, mediate, don't instigate. And I would literally hear students saying that later in the day. And I think those are the kinds of subliminal messages we need to get across to students so that they take ownership of this, and the culture changes from one that exalts or celebrates bullying to one that really rejects it and looks for other alternatives.
That's a great point. I agree with that. I think the problem is societal. I think it's bigger. I think we can have an effect. We can change bullying by raising consciousness of other kids. But I think it's a societal problem, and that it can sometimes be a distraction from our bigger problems. But there's another issue with this movie, The Bully, right? Bully, because it's getting an R rating because of the language that's inside the. To me, that's the craziest thing in the world. Like this, we can't let kids see this because they might hear some of the language that they hear every day at school, right? I mean, I was a kid, everybody swore. I don't understand this thing about trying to protect kids from swear words. Do kids swear at your school?
I'm sure they do.
Okay, right. I mean,
it is encouraging to see that the industry, Hollywood, is pushing back on this, and this rating is not a legal requirement. It's voluntary. So really, a movie theater chain such as AMC can decide, we're going to show this regardless, which they are doing, and people will come see it, and it may be a new day for ratings.
And so they can allow underage kids into that movie?
Well, there will be no rating.
Oh, so there's no rating. Oh, so there's no rating.
They will not advertise a rating.
Didn't you hear that public radio segment? It was an interview about how this is part of a marketing strategy by the distributor to get more people to hear about the movie.
Oh, so I've been duped by them? Is that what you're saying?
I just want to make one point, and that is
no, Marcy, we don't have
just. And that is about this culture of denial, because even though it seems like shootings that occurred in Oakland are random or sudden violence, how frightening. It's never sudden. There are always clues along the way. There are warning signs. There are red lights, and we need to recognize them.
I'm with you. I think it's amazing that these shootings keep happening, and what happened in Arizona with Congressperson, and nobody's talking about gun control. It doesn't even come up. No, it's just nothing. Nobody will even bring it up because we have one party in this country right now, right? And last words on education. What would you like to see happen going forward to help improve education?
I think that taking a place-based approach, really looking at the communities that we serve and how we can reorganize our schools to meet their needs, not our needs, and an emphasis on reading. I mean, you're hearing all this stuff about test scores, and I will tell you firsthand, students can score proficient on test scores and still read 2 grade levels behind. And how are they going to really be educated and really participate in our democracy if they can't read well and think well? So those are the 2 things I'd like to see going forward.
Can't disagree with that. Right. Last word, Adolfo.
I'd like to see more print and broadcast, electronic media, higher education reporters.
Okay. We'd all
more education reporters.
That's what we need. More reporters will fix the problem.
I think it's a question of really getting accurate information out to the public of a very complicated issue, and communicating that it's nuanced, and the more information people have, the better.
And how do we attract better people into the teaching profession? Because, you know, they say that now all the top students...
Wait a minute.
Okay.
They say,
this is your second offensive comment.
Well, salary, right?
No, but that's the
salary is what
the
attracts
big question
people,
is
right?
how do we attract people? Because they've done studies. The data shows that the top students go to Wall Street, and they're not attracted to the teaching profession. And you would say raise the pay. I would say double the pay. You know, I'm with David Letterman on that. You know, they should be making $150,000 a year.
All right, my turn. What would I do?
Yes, what would you do, Marcy?
Here's what I would do. Number one, I would fund the schools. Instead, we're losing librarians, nurses, teachers, thousands are laid off. Crazy, right? This is our future. Fund the school. Number two, I would, like Atyani said, emphasize reading. Invest in classroom libraries, diverse libraries. That's really, really key, critical. I would also take care of basic needs.
That's what she's saying.
Healthcare, food insecurity. And I would shift the focus from test, 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 drill, 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 to problem-based learning. How do we solve this problem as a team? Case studies, project-based learning. Kids love that. That's why they want to come to school. Oh, look at my project. Look what I did with so-and-so. This is what excites students, not constantly preparing for a test.
Yeah, well, that's a pipe dream, but thanks for sharing it. That's really nice of you. I want to thank our guests, Atyani Howard.
Atyani.
Oh, God damn it.
You have a learning
It's in my head. I do. I have a learning disability. Okay. I apologize.
It is a challenging name.
Well, I said it once wrong.
I really
helped you.
quickly.
Atyani Howard.
Atyani Howard. Thank you very much.
Yes.
You were a great guest.
Thank you for having me.
Educated me on charter schools. I appreciate it. Adolfo why am I so bad with these names? Adolfo Guzman-Lopez.
Hey, very
there you go. I got it. All right. And Marcy Winograd, thank you very much for being our guest. I want to thank Michelle Rhee and Bob Summerby and of the Daily Hour for leaving our points today. And I hope you got educated on education. I know I got educated on education, and we'll see you next time on The Point.